For Jerusalem's sake, I will not remain quiet till her vindication shines out like the dawn, her salvation like a blazing torch. No longer will they call you deserted or name your land desolate, for the Lord will take delight in you. Say to Zion, see, your Messiah comes.
Welcome to They Thought for Themselves. I'm your host, Warren Marcus. And our guest today is Hal Sachs. And he has been an electrical engineer and became involved with the TV industry. But I want to go into his story a little bit so you could hear it for yourself. Hal, tell me about your parents and their Jewishness.
Well, Warren, thank you for inviting me on the program. It's an honor to be here with you. Yeah, I was raised in an Orthodox Jewish home. My granddad was an Orthodox cantor.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, a lot of Jewish heritage, a lot of Jewish history.
Now, you had a really extraordinary love for the God of Israel, but also for the patriarchs. And you looked at the patriarchs as what incredible men of God these were. What did it do inside of you? What did you want and desire because you knew about this?
That's a good question. The thing that I really saw in the stories that were told and the stories that I read of my Jewish ancestry and the founding fathers of Judaism and the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the prophets, the kings, was this incredible relationship that they had with the living God, that they did incredible exploits, that there were amazing things that this God revealed himself so clearly to his people, and often through these men and women. It was something that captured me and really confounded me because, well, I didn't quite see that in my growing up, in my early ages. Didn't really hear it in modern times. Why wasn't this same God of heaven and earth, the same God of Israel, Abraham, why wasn't he operating in Israel and among the people like he did then? Although in 1967, it was really fascinating to watch how Israel had this unbelievable victory over the Arab nations, and everybody would say, but the God of Israel did this, and we'd all celebrate that. So there were little glimpses of seeing God work in those days, and to me, still God was a mystery.
Now, you pursued a career in electrical engineering.
Well, I went to school in electrical engineering, and as I was going through the school and the training, my sister and I were professional dancers. So we loved to dance together, and we were discovered, you might say, in Hollywood, because that's where I lived. We, as our family, grew up in Los Angeles, Southern California. And we were somehow selected to come dance on some of these TV programs. This was in 1965, and we would be invited to do commercials, we'd be invited to do movies, when the dance craze was going on, and every different kind of modern contemporary dance, we'd learn them and we'd do them. I loved it. So while I was doing this with my sister on the TV program, the guys at the studio, I got to get to know them, and I loved this electronics and the stuff that's going on. I would ask questions. Finally, they asked me if I wanted a job. And I was just coming out of high school at the time. So I said, actually coming out of high school, going through college. And finally they said, why don't you come work with us? So that's how I broke into the TV motion picture industry, which I ended up making, a long story short, spending 27 years.
Now, you were invited by the Israel government to help start a TV station in Israel.
It was really a fascinating thing. It was in 1968, actually. I had been pioneering with a group of guys out of Los Angeles that were specializing in remote TV. Mm-hmm. Israeli government wanted to start building Israeli television. So this Professor Katz gets a hold of me from Israel. I didn't know a Professor Katz, but he got on me. He says, heard about what you're doing. Would you be interested in coming to Israel? And would you be interested in helping us build Israeli television? And I said, well, I'll come. Well, now this is 1968. It was right after the Six-Day War, so things were still pretty raw in Israel, but it was a fascinating time. And when I got there and we started negotiating on what they wanted and how they wanted me to come, and all of a sudden I'm presented with the idea, we would like you to come, but you'd have to become an Israeli citizen. I thought, well, this is intriguing. In those days, Warren, they didn't have dual citizenship.
Yeah.
So it would have meant I would have to give up my American passport and become an Israeli citizen. And in my early 20s, very early 20s, I was not ready to do that. In fact, I had just served in the military and had an honorable discharge, and all of this was going on, and they even promised they wouldn't put me in the Israeli army because I'd already served in America. But I just wasn't ready to make that choice. So for about a month, I took the tour around Israel and just kind of thought, if I'm ever going to be here, this is probably going to be a good opportunity.
Wow. Well, when we come back, we're going to find out what a nice Jewish boy, right, Hal, was invited to help document the Jesus revolution that was going on. How did a nice Jewish boy like him get promoted to do this documentary? Let's find out when you get back.
In 70 AD, the Jewish temple was destroyed. We lost our country and became wandering Jews. Even our faith was reinvented. Judaism became Rabbinic Judaism, and the rabbis became our mediators to access God. This man-made religious Judaism continued all the way to my generation. But at 30, I thought for myself. I was shocked when I read the Jewish scriptures, not through the lens of the rabbis. The scriptures taught me how to live in supernatural peace, no matter what. They also answered every question I had. I even learned what happens after you die. It's time for you to think for yourself. Download my free ebook detailing my supernatural experience with Jesus and irrefutable proof that Jesus is the Messiah of the whole world. Better yet, why we need a Messiah. Go to sidroth.org/think.
Welcome back to They Thought for Themselves. We were talking with Hal about him being in Israel. And there's something interesting, Hal, that happened in Israel, because this is an experiential thing. Tell us about what happened when you went to visit the Western Wall.
Well, first of all, it was an amazing time in Israel. I mean, this is my land. This is where my people, this is where our people, this is the very roots of our very existence and our meaning. And I thought, if I'm going to be here, I want to see it all. And I did. We went to the Western Wall. And as I went up to the wall, I thought, this has got to be the most holy place for the Jewish community, for the Jewish individual. This is the place that if God's presence is anywhere, He's here. And I thought, I may never get here again. I don't know but while I'm here, I'm going to talk to Him. We're going to have a dialogue. And so I went up to the wall and I started pouring my heart out to God. And all of a sudden, I just began to weep like a baby. I became just overwhelmed with emotion. And I thought, what is going on? This is really an amazing experience. And yet, you know, I mean, I'm a young man, and what am I doing crying like a baby? So I finished praying, and I walked away from the wall and joined my friends and went off and got a falafel. And
Love those falafels.
yeah, really, they're great falafels in Israel. And I'll never forget, I wiped my eyes off, and I went on, and I said, well, that was an emotional experience. And we went on. But I didn't realize until later, and it was not that much, maybe a year or so later, that I thought back on that experience, and I thought, this was a visitation
Yes.
of God.
Yes.
This was not just an emotional experience.
Yes. Wow.
Went on from there to live in Europe for a while, worked in Italian motion picture industry, worked for the US government on some projects, got a call to go back to Los Angeles. And as I went back to Los Angeles, I'm working between jobs, and I get a call from a friend of mine that says, I belong to this little church in Costa Mesa, and they need help on a documentary. I said, okay. Do you think you have the time to, you and I work on this together? I said, yeah, let's go take a look. So we went to this little church that was experiencing this phenomenon that they wanted to document. I knew nothing about this stuff.
This is the Jesus revolution that
Well,
we're seeing
yeah,
the movies out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the very thing that we saw in the movie. It was the Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa,
Crazy.
and the man who invited me to come and work with him was Chuck Smith.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in his office, and we're talking about this documentary, and he says, well, wait a minute, let me share something with you so you'll know kind of where we're coming from here. He said, first of all, Hal, I want to put you at ease. I make you a promise, nobody's going to try and convert you. No one's going to come after you and try and make a Christian out of you. We're just honored that you would come and be willing to help us. But I want to also share with you, just so there's clarity, you and I celebrate the same God. We worship the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he said. The same God of Israel. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, all right. He said, the difference is, he says, you are waiting for a coming Messiah. He said, but we recognize we're people who fall short and miss the mark and cannot have a relationship with God. So we go through who we believe is the Messiah, Jesus, Yeshua, and we accept what he has done for us to make a way to have relationship with the living God.
Wow.
And I went, oh, okay, good for you. This was kind of my very first introduction to anything like this. And went on and I started interviewing these young people. It was phenomenal. 7 days a week, services were going on. I was there nearly all that time, 3 and 4 times a day on Saturday and Sunday, every night during the week. And I would go and I'd take notes and interview these young people. Warren, it was an amazing thing. These young people were either caught up in drugs or caught up in the occult or caught up in unbelievable destructive lifestyles.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, they met this one Jesus, Yeshua, and their lives were completely turned around, and their stories were all consistent. They set free of drugs, set free of all the destructive ways, just turned around their lives, and now they're celebrating the God of heaven and earth, and they're coming together. And that was just not one kind of person. It was every kind of person. Hippies and surfers and greasers and gray hairs and every creed, every color, every nationality. They're all enjoying God together, and it blew me away, Warren, because you couldn't get these people in the same room together normally.
Wow. Wow. Now, you had told me when I was talking to you that though there were sermons being given and things like that,
Yeah.
what was happening though? Were you here?
Right. I didn't hear a thing. It went right over my head. I didn't listen to the sermons. I didn't, sermons, what's a sermon? You know? And they're playing nice music, but they're singing to the Jesus. Okay, I'm okay with that. They can sing to whoever they want to. But you know what I'm saying? What blew me away was the young people loved, accepted me, didn't judge me, didn't have any problems with my not being a Christian or a follower as they were.
Right.
And the hospitality, the acceptance, there was something about the love and the simplicity of their transformation that caught my attention. And it literally, when I saw them celebrating God like they were, it drove me to jealousy. And immediately, my sense was, I'm missing something. I went back to the synagogue. So I figured, I'm going to go back to the synagogue. I'm going to find the best synagogue in Beverly Hills. God, I didn't live far from there at the time, so I went to I think it was Mount Sinai in Beverly Hills, and I went there, and oh yes, Shabbat services, Friday night, Saturday. Well, it was all wonderful. Everybody, how are you? Good day. Oneg Shabbat, where they would, have the celebration, and I thought, I'm home. But it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
It wasn't the same.
Well, when we come back, we're going to find out about a book that Hal received that kind of really opened his eyes. As a matter of fact, as a Jew, I was given that same book, and it opened my eyes. You'll hear more about it when we come back.
A botched surgery leaves a Jewish man paralyzed for life. He becomes deeply depressed, knowing that he'll be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his days. But then he discovers a revelation that totally changes his life and leads him to be miraculously healed. He completely regains the ability to walk, even though 25 doctors, neurosurgeons, and neurologists can't explain this. Do you want to learn what this revelation was? For the ending to this true story, go to www.theythoughtforthemselves.com.
So Hal received a book that opened his eyes, and it's the same book that I received as a Jewish person, really struggling with the question about Messiah, and that book opened my eyes too. Tell us about that book.
It was called Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey.
Yeah.
And the first chapter of the book is, what is prophecy? So it took the prophecies out of the Old Testament, and it showed prophecies that were spoken and prophecies fulfilled in the Old Testament. And then the next chapter was, well, what about prophecies concerning a Messiah, a coming Messiah? And I'm okay so far. And I said, all right, so there's prophecies about a coming Messiah, okay. And then the next chapter was prophecies of this coming Messiah fulfilled. And I'm going, hold it right here, time out. There's something wrong with this picture. How could this Gentile come up with such interpretation. There's something wrong with that. So immediately I thought, no, I'm going to go to the rabbi and I'm going to find out what I'm missing here, because we've never been taught anything about prophecies in the Old Testament, nor prophecies about a Messiah, let alone anything that's been fulfilled in the context of a Messiah. And so I go to the rabbi at the synagogue, and I sit in his class, and I'm going, and I'm about falling asleep, and I'm going, wait a minute, come on, Rabbi, help me. You know, at the end of the class, I go up to him and say, Rabbi, you got to help me. I read this book, and I need to have some answers. He says, what is it? I said, well, here it is. Tell me, is there prophecies in the Old Testament concerning Israel that were given and then fulfilled? Are there prophecies concerning a Messiah? And are these prophecies, have they been fulfilled? Are they still being fulfilled? Tell me, Rabbi, I need to know. And he looked at me. He says, Hal, he says, you've come from a nice Jewish home. You've been raised in a good Jewish family. He said, son, he said, these kind of questions aren't going to get us anywhere. It'll only upset the apple cart. He said, don't bother yourself with these questions anymore. And he left. He walked away. And I thought, this is not an answer. If he would have given me an answer, which he didn't have, I may not have made the decision I made. Shortly following that, I'm invited to a dinner. And these really nice Christian businessmen, I'm around Christians now, and they're nice people. It's okay. They're nice. They're not trying to convert me, right? They're nice people. And so I'm going to this dinner. And who's the speaker but Professor Marvin Lutzker? That's not Irish, if anybody's asking. Okay. Professor Marvin Lutzker. He's the professor of biochemistry at the University of Southern California. So he's a mensch. He's definitely got something on the ball. He's up there, and I'm thinking, what is this nice Jewish guy doing up there among the Christians? What has he got to say? And he shares his testimony, he shares his story, how he met Messiah, this one called Jesus, and how it was a miraculous discovery, and how he prayed for his Jewish mother, and she got healed, and all of these things. And I'm going, time out. What is he doing? He's deceiving these nice Jewish Christian men. They're going to go out and look for Jews who they can convert. And he's going to go on to Israel, and he's going to convert all the Jews in Israel, he said. And I'm going, I was upset. I immediately said, I got to talk to this guy before he leaves. And then he comes walking down my direction. And I thought, well, either I got to stop him, or if he stops, I'm in trouble. Because he's going to look at me and say, hey, nice Jewish guy like you doing a place like this. And I'm going to go, da, 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 da. But so I thought, I got to make the first move. And I grabbed his arm, looked up, I said, I got to talk to you. We went in the back of the restaurant, and we sat down. And he starts over again how this Messiah had changed his life, and Jesus is the Messiah, and on again. And I'm saying, no, this can't be true, and I'm trying to win him back to Judaism, and as all this is going on, we're arguing like two good Jews, right? Except if he wants to be Jewish, he can't be a Christian. That was my presupposition. You can't be both. If you're an elephant, you're an elephant. If you're a giraffe, you're a giraffe. There's not a mix. So he stops and he says to me, I know the answer. I said, what? He said, let's pray. I said, okay, then what? Let God show us who's right, you or me. If God shows me I'm in the error, I will repent. I will go back to these Christian businessmen, and I'll tell them I was wrong. If God shows you that Jesus is Messiah, are you willing to accept that? And I knew, of course, God's going to show him he's wrong, and I'm going to have a mitzvah. It's going to be a blessing for me, and we're going to go home, and I'm going to bring him back to Judaism. So I'm bowing my head, and I'm waiting, And I'm not hearing anything. And then he speaks up. He says, "Not like that." I thought, well, trick. He's got a trick up his sleeve. I said, "Not like what, Marvin?" He said, "You got to turn this off and you got to open this up." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm trying to figure out what kind of trick is this?" And I went like this. I said, "Marvin, look, I know how to love. I know how to do good deeds. I can do mitzvahs. I can have friends." And he said to me, "No, Hal, God called this the heart and this the mind." Then he quotes to me, he said, "You know the word that says, 'Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, thy mind, and thy strength.'" He said, the very first thing he said is you start with the heart. And I sat back in my chair and I looked at him, and it was like something hit me. It was like a 2x4. And I realized there was nothing here. I had a mind to know him. I had a mind to love him, but I didn't have a heart to love him.
Wow.
Because I didn't have one. And I sat there like a broken man, like Isaiah says, a man undone. And I looked at him and I said, "Marvin, before we ask him to reveal whether he's for real or not for real and who he is, we've got to ask God first to give me a heart to know him." So we prayed, "God, give me a heart to know you." And it was like going under the surgical knife. I went into shock. I went in, my body, my mind, my thoughts, my eyes, my breath. I was in shock. I trembled. And I heard the term immediately come through like an arrow through my mind. "You meshumad you." And in Jewish, you know that meshumad means you traitor, you turncoat, you're forsaker of your people. And I said, "What did I do? I'm going to have to deal with that later. Right now, I'm too shook up. I don't know what's going on." I stumbled to my feet. And I staggered out of there and do not know even at this day how I actually got home. I drove home because I found myself the next morning in bed. And that began a life-changing journey that has gone now for over 50 years.
You know, God has a plan and a purpose for you. We need to begin to think for ourselves because God has a plan and purpose. It says in Ephesians, before the foundations of the world, he knew us and prepared us to have a destiny on earth that will change lives and bring others into the kingdom. In Jesus' name.